The doctor is out, permanently. But not in the way you might think. This isn't a story about a doctor retiring to a sunny beach or a quiet countryside. No, this is a tale that delves into the shadows of the medical world, where trust is betrayed and lives are lost. Harold Shipman. Sounds like a cheerful chap, doesn't he? The name might conjure images of a friendly neighborhood doctor, someone who would greet you with a warm smile and a comforting presence. Maybe runs a quaint little bookshop or collects stamps. You might imagine him spending his weekends in a cozy bookshop, surrounded by the scent of old pages, or meticulously adding to a prized stamp collection. But reality paints a far darker picture. This guy was a doctor, and not the good kind. He wasn't the kind of doctor who would hold your hand through a tough diagnosis or cheer you up with a joke. No, Shipman was the kind of doctor who turned the sanctity of his profession into a weapon. He was the kind that gave doctors a bad name, and undertakers a booming business. His actions left a trail of grief and sorrow, filling cemeteries and funeral homes with the victims of his twisted sense of power. See, Shipman wasn't patching up boo-boos and curing sniffles. He wasn't the kind of doctor who would give you a lollipop after a shot, or reassure you that everything would be all right. Instead, he was orchestrating a sinister plan, one that involved the ultimate betrayal of his patient's trust. He was dishing out death certificates like they were going out of style. Each signature on those documents represented a life cut short, a family left in mourning, and a community shaken to its core. The final tally? 218 confirmed victims. That's not just a number, it's a staggering testament to the scale of his crimes. Each victim had a story, a life, and loved ones who were left to grapple with the unimaginable loss. That's a lot of house calls. Shipman often visited his victims in the comfort of their own homes, a place where they felt safe and secure. Little did they know, they were inviting a predator into their sanctuary. This wasn't some rogue surgeon with shaky hands. Shipman was meticulous, calculated, and cold-blooded. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he did it with a chilling precision that defied the very essence of his profession. This was calculated, cold-blooded murder. His eyes, devoid of empathy, reflected the darkness within. Each crime scene photo tells a story of trust betrayed and lives stolen. And the weapon of choice? Diamorphine. A powerful opioid, it was meant to alleviate pain and suffering. In Shipman's hands, it became a tool of death, a means to an end that only he could justify. You might know it by its street name, heroin. It's a substance more commonly associated with the dark alleys and back streets of the world, not the sterile, trusted environment of a doctor's office. It's not exactly the first thing you'd expect your friendly neighborhood GP to be packing. When you think of a general practitioner, you imagine someone who carries a stethoscope, a blood pressure cuff, maybe even a reassuring smile. But Shipman carried something far more sinister. But hey, that's why they call it practicing medicine, right? It's a phrase that implies learning, growth, and the occasional mistake. But in Shipman's case, it was a dark irony, a mockery of the trust placed in him by his patients. This story is a wild ride through the dark side of medicine, folks. Buckle up. As we delve deeper into the twisted mind of Harold Shipman, prepare yourself for a journey that will challenge your perceptions of trust, safety, and the very nature of the medical profession. This is not just a story about a doctor gone rogue, it's a chilling reminder of the fragility of the trust we place in those who hold our lives in their hands. Shipman wasn't some creepy back-alley quack. He wasn't the kind of doctor you'd find in a horror movie, lurking in the shadows with a sinister grin. No, Shipman was far more insidious. He was the kind of doctor who could walk into any room and immediately put everyone at ease. He was your average, seemingly respectable GP, the kind of doctor who would greet you with a warm smile and a firm handshake, making you feel like you were in the best hands possible. He had the whole package. The calm demeanor, the reassuring smile, the "I'm here to help" vibe. Patients would walk into his clinic with a myriad of ailments and walk out feeling hopeful, reassured that they were on the path to recovery. He could charm the wrinkles off a prune. His charisma was almost palpable, and his patients, especially the elderly, adored him. They saw him as a beacon of hope, a guardian of their health. People trusted him. They invited him into their homes, confided in him, let him inject them with stuff. Big mistake, huge. They never suspected that the man they trusted with their lives was actually orchestrating their deaths. See, Shipman had this thing for diamorphine. It wasn't just a medication to him, it was a tool, a means to an end. Not for himself, mind you, he wasn't addicted to it. No, his addiction was far more sinister. No, he was all about sharing the love, of eternal sleep. He believed he was doing his patients a favor, granting them a peaceful end. He'd pop over to his elderly patients' homes, shoot them up with a lethal dose, and then sit back and watch the Grim Reaper clock in for another shift. It was a routine for him, a twisted ritual that he performed with chilling precision. It was the perfect crime. Who suspects the doctor? They're the good guys, except when they're not. Shipman exploited this trust, hiding his malevolent intentions behind a mask of professionalism and care. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing, preying on the vulnerable and the trusting. His actions were a stark reminder that sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones we least expect. For years, Shipman operated under the radar. He was the kind of doctor who seemed to have it all together. Patients trusted him, colleagues respected him, and the community saw him as a pillar of medical excellence. But behind that facade, a sinister plot was unfolding. Patients died, but hey, they were old, right? It's not uncommon for elderly patients to pass away, especially when they're already in poor health. But in Shipman's case, the frequency of these deaths was alarming. It happens. Except it was happening way too often in Shipman's care. The numbers were staggering, yet no one seemed to notice the pattern. It was as if a dark cloud hung over his practice, but it went unnoticed in the hustle and bustle of the hospital, but nobody connected the dots. The deaths were written off as natural causes, and Shipman continued his work without interruption. Families mourned, funerals were held, and life moved on. But the shadow of suspicion was growing, not until a few people started getting suspicious, like, really suspicious. Family members began to question the sudden and unexpected deaths of their loved ones. They noticed inconsistencies in the medical records and started to piece together a disturbing puzzle. Turns out, when you kill a bunch of people and forge their wills to make yourself look like the beneficiary, it tends to raise some eyebrows. Who knew? Shipman's greed was his downfall. The forged documents were sloppy, and the discrepancies were too glaring to ignore. Suddenly, the good doctor wasn't looking so good anymore. The once respected physician was now the prime suspect in a series of murders. His colleagues were shocked, his patients were horrified, and the community was in disbelief. The cops got involved, the investigation began, and the truth, as they say, was about to get a whole lot more murderous. Detectives dug deep into Shipman's past, uncovering a trail of death and deception that spanned years. The evidence was overwhelming, and the case against him was airtight. Shipman's reign of terror was finally over, but the scars he left behind would never fully heal. Remember those suspicious deaths? Turns out they weren't so natural after all. Autopsies revealed lethal doses of diamorphine in the victims' systems. And guess who just happened to have a penchant for prescribing diamorphine? Ding ding ding, we have a winner! The evidence was piling up faster than bodies in a Shipman waiting room. The police raided his house and found enough medical records and forged documents to fill a library. This guy was organized. He even kept a diary. Talk about incriminating evidence. It was like he wanted to get caught. Section 5218 reasons you should be wary of your GP. The trial was a media frenzy. Shipman, the once respected doctor, became the most hated man in Britain. And with good reason. The jury didn't need long to reach a verdict. Guilty on 15 counts of murder. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. A later inquiry concluded that Shipman had likely killed at least 218 of his patients. 218. That's not a doctor, that's a one-man plague. Section 6, Shipman's Shadow, the Erosion of Trust. Shipman's crimes sent shockwaves through Britain and beyond. How could a doctor, sworn to heal and protect, commit such horrific acts? It shook people's faith in the medical profession to its core. Suddenly that kindly old GP wasn't so reassuring anymore. He was a potential serial killer in a white coat. The trust, once implicit, was gone, replaced by suspicion and fear. Shipman's legacy wasn't just a body count, it was a generation forever looking over their shoulder at the doctor's office. Section 7, Justice, served, eventually. Shipman was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice was served, but it wouldn't bring back the victims. He died in his cell in 2004, taking his secrets and the true extent of his crimes with him. Some say he committed suicide, others say it was natural causes. Either way, the world was rid of one very bad doctor. Section 8, Beyond the Grave, Shipman's Legacy of Fear. Harold Shipman's story isn't just about one man's depravity, it's a stark reminder that monsters can hide in plain sight, even in the most trusted professions. It's about the fragility of trust and the devastating consequences when that trust is shattered. Section 9, the takeaway, always get a second opinion or a third just in case. So, what's the lesson here? Well, for starters, always get a second opinion, and maybe a third just to be safe. But more importantly, trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. And if your doctor starts offering you diamorphine for a headache, run. Run very, very far.